On this episode, we talk with Voranai Vanijaka, noted social commentator and editor-in-chief of Thisupt.
So if you want some insight into what the contemporary media and political landscape looks like in Thailand, you'll learn a lot from this episode of the Bangkok podcast.
Sawadee krap there, fine folks, and welcome to the Bangkok podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to work on a groundbreaking new business, a small drinking establishment staffed by attractive women that caters to expat men. But when I got here, I realized it had already been done, so I got a job in an office instead.
Almost, man. You were almost a genius.
Close enough.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract almost 20 years ago. Started to learn how to say all the Thai vowels. And I'm still trying to do it right, so I've never left. Dude, there's like 350, aren't there? There's like 350 of them, right?
Yeah, there's, you know, the difference between sala and sala and sala e.
That's about right. You know,
yeah. At some point, you're just gonna make your throat like spasm with constrictions trying to say a word properly.
Anyway, we want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, Tommy Nilsson, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after our interview with Voranai Vanijaka to hear why Tommy has officially been declared the Farang Thai language tutor, which, as you can tell already, we need for the Bangkok podcast.
Kabom.
And a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons like Tommy also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about the challenges Greg faces as he makes new, as he calls them, derivative friends with a wide variety of ties via his son's playdates, a marathon that banned, then allowed foreigners to take part in it, and the surprising ease and high-tech convenience of getting a digital work permit in Bangkok. Anyway, to become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Right on. All right. Well, before we jump into it, we have to mention an email that we got from one of our listeners, Dom. Now, Ed, you remember last week we had an interview with my friend Ening, who just finished her stretch of quarantine.
Yes, I do remember that.
After coming back from Singapore. Yeah, and she said she's done now and she's out back into the world and living La Vida Loca. But she had an okay time of it. It wasn't so awful. It was about as good as being trapped in a hotel room for 2 weeks can be. But Dom wrote us, and he said his experience actually ain't that great. So there's a real spectrum of what people are going through. And let me just read this email from Dom, which he gave me permission to read. He said, I've got 5 days to go in quarantine. Today we were informed we can't go outside our room at all. I was in the gym for an hour. Now nothing, without explanation. I'm near the airport, paying 44,000 Thai baht for the quarantine. My room is so noisy with road noise. I can smell cigarette smoke through the air conditioner. It's a bad ending to a very difficult 5 months locked out from my wife and kids. Luckily, I was locked out in New Zealand, safe and sound. I've lived in Thailand for 20 years, married with 2 kids. The process of getting home has cost to date 250,000 baht, consisting of insurance, airfares, medicals, visa fees, hotel, plus living expenses, food, etc. while in New Zealand. I am at my most vulnerable here in this hotel, currently at a very low ebb, trying to keep upbeat. My wife's a doctor who's very committed to her job in public health. If not, we would relocate back to New Zealand. Kids are excelling at school and enjoy it very much, thank goodness. So it sounds like Dom has not had an easy go of it. And imagine, man, just 5 months away from your wife and kids would suck.
That is brutal, no doubt. In a way, I think what we heard last week was probably the best case scenario.
Yeah. Ening was lucky that it all worked out well for her. But as Dom can attest, it's not going so smoothly for a lot of people, I guess. So as this episode airs, Dom will have finished quarantine. And Dom, we hope you're doing okay. Drop us a line and let us know how things are back with your family. I hope you're taking them out and spending all the time you can with it, eating lots of ice cream and watching lots of funny movies. Because it sounds like you deserve it.
For sure.
Okay, on this episode, we are psyched to have back one of our original guests from way back in the day, and one of the most interesting people in modern Thai media, Kun Voranai Vanijaka. Kun Voranai is a well-known political and social commentator and award-winning journalist for his widely read column in the Bangkok Post, which ran from 2008 to 2014. He currently teaches political communication and global media industries at Thammasat University and public speaking at Webster University. But most notably, he is the founder and editor-in-chief of Thisrupt, a website creating provocative stories to inspire people to stand up and speak out for rights, liberty, and equality. And don't you know, Kun Voranai was a guest on episode 14 and on episode 57 of season 1 of this very podcast way back in 2010. So it was really cool to sit down with him again, catch up, and talk about what's changed, what's new, and what is next in Thailand. So here is my interview with Kun Voranai Vanijaka. All right, Kun Voranai, welcome back to the Bangkok podcast. I was just talking with you quickly, and we realized that it has been about 10 years since you were on the Bangkok podcast. You were a guest in season 1 in 2010.
Yes,
and
2010, 10 years, a couple of street protests, and one coup d'etat.
Just one? I can't keep track of
Just
all
one.
the coups.
I might have missed a couple, but there have been so many, sometimes you lose count.
Yeah, they all bleed together at one
I'm
point.
sorry to start the show with such controversy, but that's the way I am.
No problem. So that you were a guest on episode 14 and episode 57 of
Right.
season 1,
Okay.
if anyone wants to go back and check. Well, thank you, sir. It's good to see you again, and thank you for making time to sit down and chat. The reason we wanted to get you on the show is because, A, you're an interesting person and you've got some good insights into Thai culture, and B, you are the founder, editor-in-chief, and head dude at Thisrupt.co, which is a new online platform that has come about in the past half year, as a result of sort of this new availability of content creation, and you're holding up a mirror to Thai culture and society. You've got some great stuff on there, and I wanted to talk about it. So can you give us the background? Why did it start? How did it start? Who started it? And what are you trying to do?
Well, the background basically for those listeners that may know something about me. My background has been in two things. I'm a writer and I'm a teacher. I teach at Thammasat University and also I teach at Webster University. And as a writer, I was editor-in-chief of BK Magazine, the first one. I was the first editor-in-chief of Guru Magazine, and I moved over to the Bangkok Post. And I wrote my commentaries for the Sunday Post. That's how I became somewhat semi-famous in a very niche market of English language news consumers. And after the Bangkok Post, I became the first editor-in-chief of GQ Magazine, Thailand. And then after that, I became a freelance for a couple of years, which means I was unemployed for a couple of years, to be honest.
I've been there.
And then again, one reflect on one's life and journey and try to figure out what one does, what one wants to do. And then one goes back to one's root. What I always love to do, what I think that I have a little bit of talent and skills to do, which is to write and to teach. And I'm already teaching, so what about writing? So I'm looking at, okay, what's available. I look at the word writing. What is writing? Writing is a way to make content, right?
Yeah.
But we live in a world of social media. Writing is not the only way. There are so many different ways to make content, but the point is to make content, because I don't write for the sake of writing. I write to put my opinion out there, to put my commentary and analysis out there, and hopefully that will be of some value to people, right? So I thought, let's do a social media platform, a website, social media, and let's be a multimedia content platform. I came up with the name Thisrupt, Thisrupt. I guess I don't have to explain much. Thisrupt is disrupt, to disrupt something. You replace the D with a TH and it becomes to disrupt Thailand. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think to disrupt is simply to have the courage to stand up and to speak out, to not be afraid to go against the grain, to be critical of your country, your culture, your society, to hold up a mirror and analyze yourself. And this is, I think it's very important for Thailand and Thai society going forward to have this retrospective look at ourselves. So Thisrupt is officially a news media platform, but it's not really a news media organization. First reason is very simple. I just don't have the resource for it to be a news media organization.
Right, okay.
It's a small startup. It's funded at the moment entirely by me. I'm not a rich man, but I know how to manage money.
All right.
And I know how to run things effectively on a shoestring budget. However, it being entirely funded by me cannot last forever, obviously.
Right.
So I am in conversation with a potential investor to add more capital into Thhisrupt so we can do more things.
Cool.
But right now it's simply funded by me. And I want Thhisrupt. I've been trying to make Thhisrupt into more of a content platform, social movement in the English language, because I do apologize. My English is not that great. My Thai is worse. This is what I always say. I grew up in Austin, Texas, so my education has been mostly in English. My job, the work that I do have always been in English, except for GQ Magazine Thailand. And when I had to write editor's note for GQ Magazine Thailand, I couldn't write in Thailand, but I could dictate in Thailand, in Thai, and had my secretary write it for me. Oh God, I miss having a secretary so much. It's the most wonderful thing on earth.
You grew up in Austin.
I grew up in Austin.
How do you translate y'all into Thai?
You don't translate y'all into anything. It's unique in and of itself. You cannot translate anything.
You
Texas.
can barely translate it into English.
We are the great state. We are one of a kind. We are our flag fly as high as the flag of the U.S. We are the only state that's allowed to do that because we are so special.
I think it's because you have guns.
That too.
Well, it's interesting because you and I were just chatting a minute ago about your site, and a few months back earlier in the season we had Cod from Thai Inquirer on as a guest, and I think you explained to me that you're trying to do sort of different things, your site and his site, but I think that it's interesting they both came about at roughly the same time. Was that as a reaction to something? Was it in response to a particular moment or a particular idea or a particular place in Thai culture right now? Or was it just sort of a timing issue? What was it?
Yes and no. Well, one reason for it is we just had our first election in 6 years last year, right?
Right.
So things are a bit more open. There's a bit more freedom of speech. There's a bit more room to do different things.
Right.
So with that, I started to think, okay, there's room to do something here, right? And also simply because for me, my own personal evolution of what I've been doing. You know, I've been freelancing for a little bit over a year. You can't really survive on that. And I wasn't really doing what I love other than the teaching. So it was just the right time to try to pick up on something that I love and try to actually make a job for myself in which I can be passionate about it, love it, and also hopefully sometime soon make money from it. Which means I'm no longer just a journalist or writer. I am also now a business owner.
Yeah.
So it was just the right timing, and of course it takes how many so ever months to think about things, analyze things, study things, and come up with a plan and come up with the slogan, the model, the philosophy, and everything else that would take to put out a content platform.
Right. Now, Thisrupt is putting out some great content, and it's very varied because, like I was talking to you earlier, the videos that Tara does about little niche observations on Thai culture and history, which are pretty benign. Yeah. But you also do some fairly, what I would consider as a foreigner, quite dangerous stuff. Like your tweets include a reference to abolishing 112, the least majest law. Pretty edgy stuff for Thailand. Are you scared? Are you nervous? Do you need to be ready for any backlash? What's your stance on being sort of an outspoken, progressive news site in a country that sometimes does not like those things? Okay, well,
two things. The content of Thisrupt. I mean, overall, we look at it as not news content. We look at it as, politics, society, economics, and everything else. These are all just expression of a culture. So our job is to explain Thailand. right? So we take it from a cultural perspective first and foremost. What's the meaning of Thai and Thainess, and how are these things expressed in politics, in business, in entertainment, so on and so forth. So that's very important to us. But when it comes to the more quote unquote controversial things, I say the same thing today as I have said to you 10 years ago. If you're not willing to push the envelope, then why do it?
Right.
If you're not willing to take risks, then why do it?
Right.
If you're not willing to put out content that a lot of people will slam you for it, then why do it? Because otherwise you would be just a PR department, right? And the government has that already.
Yeah, that's a ballsy position to take, and I get it, and I agree with it. For someone in my shoes, as a foreigner here, who has no money and very very few powerful friends, if any, we have to be very careful. I think it's an interesting difference between what we do. Like, we do this podcast every week, but we have to be very careful that we don't piss off the wrong person, or that we don't say the wrong thing, or we don't discuss the wrong topic. So self-censorship is very much a part of being a media creator in Thailand, especially when you're a foreigner. But you as a Thai, I think, you're not immune, but I think you have a bit more wiggle room than we do.
It's a matter of perception. I try to look at things in a very matter of fact manner. As long as I'm not doing anything illegal, as long as I don't talk illegally, then I'm abiding by the law. Then I am free to say and do as I please. And I would put the same philosophy to foreigners living in Thailand. I believe in freedom of speech. I think anyone should be able to express their opinion about anything. And as long as you don't break the law, then nobody should be able to do anything to you. But of course, whatever you say, you will receive. There will be people that love what you say. There will be people that hate what you say. And both sides will express their opinions on what you say. And that's conversation. And that's all. And I think it's very important to generate conversation, to have discussion. That's the beginning of everything. If you look at the society that are not quote unquote very evolved, that are not very progress, it starts from the social value, the cultural value of not being able to speak. You can't say this, you cannot say that, this is too inappropriate, that is not proper, so on and so forth. So if you can't even speak about it, then where are you going to go? You can't progress. Everything first start with an honest dialogue.
You got to walk before you can run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would not know what to do. How can you form strategies and make actions without first talking everything out, analyzing everything, right? Unfortunately, this is what Thailand do. We don't talk. We don't listen, we don't analyze, we close our eyes, and we just do it in a very fancy, extravagant way for our cultural image and face value. Everything is launched with all the dazzling light and colors and campaigns and big monies, and at the end of the day, what does it achieve? Not a damn thing.
I've talked on the show before about how back in the day when I first came to Thailand, I was a quote-unquote teacher, and I was really excited at first about having debates in class and discussing cool ideas. And after a few months, I was beaten down sufficiently by the people at the top. Like, just read the book, Yeah. The students aren't there to think too much. They're just there to listen to you talk.
No, I mean, we all get beaten down. I have written articles that people love me for it. I have written articles that people just slam me for it. I remember back at the Bangkok Post, I written a couple of articles critical of expats and foreigners living in Thailand. And oh lordy, lordy, lord, oh my God, I would rather write badly about conservative Thais than write badly about expats living here. But that's just go with the territory. It's not going to stop me. It's not going to shut me up. But not because my job. I think everybody should be able to put your opinion out there, and let's discuss. Let's talk. Better yet, let's talk rationally. Let's talk with reason. Let's not talk with self-righteous anger and hatred and thinking that your opinion is universal fact. It's not, right? recently we published an article by a 16-year-old lady, Ang, who's attending an international school.
Yeah.
And Young, Rich, and Ignorant.
Young, Rich, and Ignorant.
Young,
that
Rich,
got,
and
that got a
Ignorant.
lot of traction online.
That went viral. That almost broke our website. And you know what? There were people that love her for it, and there are people that hate her for it. And she get applause and she gets slams. And when I asked her, how do you feel? And she said, I'm good. That makes me feel good, because think about it. In a society that traditionally demand young people to shut up, to not talk back,
Right.
to not question. In a society where not just young people, anybody is taught not to stand up and speak out. Here we have a 16-year-old girl standing up and speaking out and putting a mirror in front of herself and the social group that she
Yeah.
comes from, right? And is willing to say what is wrong and what is right, right? And to me, this is if this is Thailand's future, I feel good about Thailand's
Right.
future. I don't feel very good about Thailand's present or the past. But if this is the future, and if there are more like her, and there are a lot more. I'm a teacher, so I know students, I know
Yeah.
young people. There are a lot more like this. Then Thailand's future is good. You know? It's simply our job as the older generation to provide the platform, to provide the guidance, to provide the opportunity, because these are the future of our country. Right,
Yeah.
you and I
Yeah.
in a couple of decades will be in retirement homes, correct?
I'm already irrelevant.
You're
Yeah.
already will be on a beach, drinking beer, being fat, or whatever.
One
But
can hope.
the future belongs to the young,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean you just give the future to the young. That means you help to nurture and foster and guide and work together to
Yeah.
build the future, rather than telling them to shut up.
How do you instill those? Like she had a fairly privileged upbringing and access to, cutting edge ideas,
Right.
quote unquote. How do you instill those values in the countryside, in the Thai young people who don't have access to those kind of ideas?
Well, I would never, ever underestimate Thais in the countryside, whether young or
Okay.
old. We do live in the age of social media and the age of the internet. And you know what? People in the countryside have smartphones like people in Bangkok. They have access to information.
Right.
Now, language might be a barrier, but it's not that big of a barrier. You know, if you are the internet generation, the social media generation, there are ways and means to access knowledge and information, both wonderful information that foster your intelligence and nurture your mind, and also stupid content that has no value other than entertain. And entertainment is awesome, right?
Yeah.
So this young generation, whether they are international school students, privileged, or they are your regular Thai middle or lower class students going to Thai schools, they are a part of this global social media community, right? A typical young Thai student, not international Thai, but Thai student, chances are this person has a lot more in common than with someone his or her age in Korea, in England, in America, than with their parents or the older generation.
Interesting.
Because they have the same right? They all watch anime. They all love K-pop. They all have their pop idols. They all have their own lingo.
Yeah.
They all have their platform. They tweet. They TikTok. They Instagram, and probably a host of other things that I have no idea.
I'm
exist.
already starting
Yeah.
to see it with my son, who's almost 6.
Right.
And he's like, he's learning stuff in kindergarten,
Exactly.
that I don't remember learning until like grade 4,
Exactly.
grade 5. He's way ahead of where I was in his video games, and he's
Yeah.
extremely digitally literate, way more than I was when I was his
Exactly,
age.
and these kids in Thailand, they play whatever video games with kids from other countries in
Yeah,
the world. And
yeah.
these virtual games, I don't know, I don't play video games, but it's an entire world out there in which people are sharing information,
Right.
exchanging information, learning about each other, and that is why recently in Thailand, we are beginning to see movement by young people.
Right.
University students, high school students starting to come out and making their demands, making their voice heard. Why are they doing this? Because they have seen the wonderful things around the world and also the horrible things around the world.
Right.
And then they look at their own country and they look at their own future. They say to themselves, wait a second. Hold on a second,
Yeah.
right? And they can do this because they have a smartphone in their hand. When I was growing up, we can't do this, right?
Right.
There's no such thing as smartphone. Hell, there weren't even mobile phone.
Yeah.
So we don't have this access to information. But now they do. So things come faster.
Well, it's interesting. I'm fascinated by the question of, you look back in Thailand's history in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, these huge, momentous protests that
Right.
were often met with bloody violence and crackdowns. They were driven by the students, by the young people at
Yeah.
the time, the university students.
Right.
And it seems to me, from a casual observer, that up until fairly recently, most university students were fairly apathetic when it came to politics or, freedom of expression. And they're just like, keep your head down and shut up. It seems to me that you wouldn't see the same type of cultural uprising today that you saw back then, at least not being led by the students. Is that changing? Are young people getting more vocal, more politically active, more willing to put things on the line?
Definitely, but I would also look at the context of things. Every country, every society has its own unique context, but still at the same time, humanity is all the same the world over, right? Back in the 60s and 70s, the students' movements, the protests, so on and so forth, it wasn't unique to Thailand. It's part of the Cold War period. It's part of this youth movement that was going on in Europe, in the States, everywhere else in Southeast Asia to go along with the Cold War and communism versus capitalism, so on and so forth. So
Right.
what was happening in Thailand is simply a part of what was happening in the world. Fast forward to perhaps the 80s and the 90s, right? People seemingly have become more apathetic towards politics. It was more about work, make money, the economy,
Greed
so
is
on and so
good.
forth. Greed is good. So
Yeah.
that's the same as what was happening in America and elsewhere.
That's really interesting. I never
Gordon
really
Gekko,
noticed that
Wall
parallel.
Street,
Yeah.
the Reagan era, and then we changed to the more politically correct era of the Clinton, so on and so forth. And the world kind of evolved in the same direction, right? And Thailand in the 80s and the 90s, we were new money, right? I mean, we lost a lot of our money already, but we were new money at the time. So it was more about making money, sending your kids to study abroad to, get that degree in hotel because tourism is great, to get that degree in finance because you have to work in banking. It's more about making money. But then come the dawn of the new millennials, and a decade later, what's going on? The world is shifting. The world is changing. The Cold War is no more. Now we're in the age of digital, social media. We are in a period where there is a gap between the older generation and the younger generation, or you might want to call it the traditional generation and the more liberal generation.
Right, yeah.
And what you're seeing in Thailand is the same as what you are seeing everywhere else. Right? Look at what happened in the States, in Europe right now with George Floyd.
Yeah.
And it's not just about George Floyd, it's about this anger that the people have, this feeling of disenfranchisement and everything else all together and blown up because of this one incident. And then you have this clash between tradition and liberalism, this clash between the generation. Same
Right.
thing in Thailand, right? The young kids today are growing up, are seeing this thing, experiencing this environment, and they are saying, wait a second, we got to do something.
Yeah.
And you can link this back to even Arab Spring and Euromaidan, right? The hashtag revolution, right? All these are beginning to happen because slowly this gap is becoming wider and wider and wider and wider. And again, the cycle of humanity is turning back towards generation clash.
So when people get to the point where they feel like they have nothing to lose,
Right.
that's when they're willing to risk more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's a good point too. Nothing to lose. Yeah? I get a lot of people ask me, why isn't Thailand, exploded in protests, riot in the street, clashing with the authorities like, in Europe and in America? I think the key phrase here is also whether you have something to lose or nothing to lose. right?
Right.
For a lot of, and this is my personal opinion, right? Right now in Thailand, everybody is waiting to see, are we going to have protests in the street? Are people going to come out?
I think people in Thailand are always kind of waiting to see if that's going to happen.
Exactly.
It could break out at any moment.
It could break out anymore. It's like a coup d'etat. Everybody is always anticipating the next one.
Yeah. I was talking to my friends when COVID started happening in the West, and the West reaction was sort of like shock and horror that something like this would happen. And I was explaining to a few friends, like in Asia, we're kind of used to this because there's always something going on. There's always a coup or an assassination or a natural disaster or a flu pandemic or something. There's always something that's going to disrupt the fabric of normalcy.
Right.
So we're kind of in Asia, we're kind of used to things getting kicked around a little bit, whereas in Western countries they're very stable and nothing really bad ever happens. On a countrywide or continent-wide scale. But when something does, people are like, "Oh my God!" But in Asia, there's always something about to happen.
Well, I grew up in Texas in the 80s and the 90s, and that I would joke around with my friends. In America, if a child has something happen to a child and it's a national issue, right?
Yeah, right.
In Asia, a mudslide in India or China kill 1 million people and it's another day, and that's just the difference between the different world.
Was that quote a single tragedy or a single death is a tragedy? A million deaths is a statistic.
But here's the thing, you see all these protests going on in the West, and they will protest, they will fight, they will loot, they will riot, they will do all these things, and there's going to be a lot of destruction, and unfortunately there's going to be a lot of death. But what there's not going to be is a coup d'etat.
Probably right.
Not probably right. Definitely right. You want to bet on that? I'm willing to bet you.
I'm not smart enough to make bets like that.
I'm willing to bet you whoever the army chief of the U.S. Army is not going to come out in tanks and talking about returning happiness to the American people. I guarantee you that, right?
Right.
And for me personally, in Thailand, we are at the stage that there are people who loves tradition and there are people who wants change.
Yeah.
That's great. I have no problem with either side. I say let's argue. I say let's talk. I say let's debate. Hell, I say let's call each other names and be very angry at each other. Right? Let's cyberbully each other. Let's make degrading memes about each other. Let's do all sort of things to each other to get your point across. That's democracy. But what should not happen is somebody riding in a tank and destroy all of that. Right? We all need to have a foundation that we can stand on. You can't break that foundation every 4 or 5 years. And within that foundation, equality is about everybody having their voice.
Right.
Everybody have their agenda. Everybody push for their agenda. And every 4 years, we duke it out in the election booth. And if you lose, there's another 4 years. But before that, before the next election come, you have 4 years to bitch and whine and cry and complain. And get many people on your side, as many as possible, so that in 4 years' time, it's like the Olympics again. Let's fight again, right? And that's democracy. And that's democracy. It doesn't get any fairer than that unless humanity can come up with a better system. But the problem with Thailand is we can't sustain that.
It doesn't seem that Thailand has really embraced democracy. It seems that they're, that old Winston Churchill quote that said democracy is the worst form of government except all the others.
Exactly.
It doesn't seem that from an outside perspective, it doesn't seem that democracy really works in Thailand very well. I don't know. It just seems that when it's given a chance, it's suffocated.
Well, again, it's the context of history, and there's no right or wrong history. History is just history, things that happen, right? I would always say, in Western society, democracy are centuries in the making.
Yeah.
And many revolutions and millions of death and destructions, including beheaded kings and queens.
Yeah.
Right? Centuries in the making. You went there, you've gone through it until you become what you are today.
It is interesting that the democracy has only been existed in Thailand for 88 years.
88 years. On June the 24th.
Yeah.
88 years exactly.
Since
and it's
1932.
not really a democracy, is it? Right? 88 years. Well, the June 24, 1932 revolution, right? We were supposed to have a democracy. We might have had it for 2 minutes, and then it became a military dictatorship. And for the past 88 years, I guarantee you, go back and count the year, right? I would say, I haven't counted in a while. I would say most of those years we were either under a military dictatorship or a democracy that is submissive to the military.
Right. So you have
never really a democracy.
So you have these other countries that are sort of like in Europe and America. I mean, they've had democracy for several hundred years. I guess it's probably a fair argument to say that Thailand is still going through its growing pains in democracy.
It's growing pain. But then, someone might say, look at Japan, look at South Korea. Well, that's because they were disrupted, right? Yeah. Japan lost World War II. The American came in, wrote a new constitution, trained up a new class of leaders. Bam, voila. They tore the old values down and replaced it with something new. Same as what happened in South Korea, right? It was a Japanese colony. It went through the Korean Wars and it was built back up. A lot of it had to do with American policy. So tearing the old tradition down to build something new. Thailand, our tradition was never torn down. Not to say that it should, mind you.
Right.
Not to say that it should.
Well, but famously never been colonized.
Exactly. Famously, like we Thais always love to say, we have never been colonized by the West, at least. This discussion can get complicated, and so we never had that interruption. We never had that disruption that brought down old traditions, so that you can build something new.
Interesting, yeah.
Versus other Southeast Asian nations, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, Malaysia, or the sultanates that existed in what is now Malaysia, they all became colonized. So old tradition torn down, build something up. Thailand, we were not interrupted or disrupted. We continue, and we are proud of that, and we should be proud of that. So it's more difficult to introduce change in Thailand. It's more difficult to build a new mindset in Thailand. Having said that, it should not be an excuse. Again, history is there to be learned from.
Right. Yeah.
What the world went through, Thailand can learn from. If the West took centuries and millions of deaths and destruction, then we can learn from that, so we don't have to go through the same thing. Right? If what happened to our Southeast Asian neighbors led to destruction and atrocity and catastrophe, then we can learn from that, so we don't have to go through the same thing.
Right.
Learn, dialogue, discussion, context, so we can disrupt in a progressive way.
Well said. So as we're wrapping up here, I want to talk about the media landscape in Thailand.
Right.
How has it changed since we last talked 10 years ago? And what do you see in the future as platforms like Thisrupt are disrupting things? In terms of freedom of expression, access to information, things going viral, the influence and effect it has on the different classes of people, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, when we last talked, I was a newspaper writer, and now I'm a digital platform editor-in-chief and founder. Well, let me explain this way. When I first started writing, and when I wrote my first article, I remember that the headline was something like "The mirror has two faces," or something like that. Okay. Don't quote me exactly, but my first article was about we Thai people should take a look at ourselves. Now, when that came out and it was very successful, and the reason it was successful was because the readers were like, "Wow, he's Thai, and he's saying this, and he's not afraid to say this." Okay, I was a novelty back then. There wasn't so much of that going on. Okay, right. Fast forward to today. It's not unique anymore.
Right.
Everybody is saying it. And you don't have to write a letter and submit to the Postback or the Bangkok Post to get published anymore. You can just post it on your Facebook and on your Twitter, and you know what? You probably get more views than anything published by mainstream media. So the entire game has totally changed, right? Today I sit here, I'm not that, No, I'm not the only one, or at least the first one doing this anymore. Everybody is doing it, right? The young lady Ang who wrote that article, boom, right there, right? She's doing it. And if you look at Twitter, you look at Facebook, everybody's doing it. Everybody is speaking out. Everybody is putting forth their opinion out there, and that's what changed. The news media organization do not monopolize content anymore.
No, they don't.
They don't monopolize information or knowledge anymore. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. But it's just the changing world that we live in. So the landscape is totally different. That's why, as Thisupt, I tell myself, what's the point of just trying to update news? Everybody knows what's going on. What I believe could be helpful is, okay, here's what's going on. But let's analyze it. Let's take a look at it. Let's form perspective. Let's start a conversation, a constructive conversation about it, and let's see where that leads us.
Right.
Now, let's be creative about doing content. Let's educate, let's entertain, and let's inspire, and let's have a few laugh about it. So that's the direction I want to take Thisupt, which is what I believe is the right direction for today's media landscape.
Right. Do you welcome competitors who do the same thing that you're trying to do? They hold up a mirror. Is it sort of a rising tide lifts all boats, the more the merrier kind of thing?
Well, as I have stated, I take it as my job, my responsibility to encourage conversation and encourage self-reflection. So whoever wants to do it, whether it's an individual person, whether it's another platform, wonderful. Let's all do it. Let's all keep doing it, because as a teacher, right, I believe education is evolution.
Yeah.
Right? Change comes in two ways. You can have a revolution. It's fast, it's quick, it's a snap of a finger, but also it's a lot of bloodshed, and it usually doesn't turn out well. If you look at all the revolutions in history,
right,
it doesn't turn. But a slower, more annoying process is education.
So you can have a quick revolution or a slow educational process, but they might ultimately end up in the same area with hopefully a more enlightened population, hopefully a better result for everyone.
End of the day, revolution. You can use violence. You can use a gun to change things. And I'm not saying I'm against that 100%. That's I'm a dude. You're a dude. We all know there comes a time when you just have to throw punches, and that's just the way life is. I'm realistic.
Yeah.
But before we get there, let's try our best not to get there, and that is simply education. Because at the end of the day, even if your revolution is successful, but if the people don't have the knowledge, don't have the perspective, then things fall apart.
Then it can be twisted.
Exactly. Then things fall apart. Look at what happened in the French Revolution. Things fell apart quickly, right? Look at what happened with Arab Spring. Some countries turned out well, but look at Syria and Libya.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a dicey thing when you pull out the guns.
If only there was some type of metaphor, maybe how a writing tool is more stronger or powerful than a weapon. Maybe the pen is stronger than the sword. That's something you see what I'm getting at.
Well, for today's word, the hashtag is mightier than the tank.
The hashtag is mightier than the tank. Well, Voranai, thank you so much for coming on and talking. Where can people find all this good new stuff?
Well, Thisupt, let me spell that, Thisupt. Google it. We are Thisupt.co, because believe it or not, Thisupt is already taken by someone. .com. So
sons of bitches.
Our social media like Instagram and Twitter and whatnot are Thisupt, and then you spell out dot and co. And we do a lot of social media content, right? Quotes, polls, and then you have the commentaries, and then you have the videos. We want to really pursue the video strategy. And again, everybody else have articles. Not that many people have videos. Let's do video. I want to always do something that is different from everyone else. Why do the same thing as everyone else? It bores the shit out of me. Let's try to let's go a different route. Let's be, let's stand on our own space.
Let's disrupt.
let's disrupt. You have completed my sentence for me. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll put the links in our show notes, and everyone out there, make sure to check it out. It's a great site, doing good stuff, really good, interesting work, and I hope it leads to more open dialogue between everyone to push everything forward.
Okay,
so,
thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on. Good to see you again.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.
Dude, I got to say this. You're really good at snagging connections with interesting people, because I've been reading, or back in the day, I used to read his columns all the time. Voranai, that is. So I know his name going way back. 12 years, I think 10 years ago, I was reading his stuff.
Yeah, it was quite popular, and a lot of people would comment about it online. Super nice guy. And, like you said, getting guests, it doesn't hurt to ask, and a lot of time people are more than happy to come on and talk about their passions or their projects or whatever they're working on. So
right, I'm still surprised how many how many people you snagged even in the first season, because there's a lot of people that come back and you're like, oh yeah, we had this guy on 8 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But Voranai is always impressive because he's super passionate. He's very well spoken. And he's doing some really interesting work. He has always been doing really interesting work, but especially now, Thisrupt is a great website. Highly worth following regularly.
Thailand definitely needs more independent media. It's just, I feel like there really is a media establishment here that just doesn't take risks, and they're not a voice for improving anything.
Yeah, you're right. And Voranai is one of those voices that is working to improve things for everyone. So more power to him. And listeners, if you haven't yet checked out Thisrupt, head over there right now and check it out, because they've got some great content.
Yeah, if you're interested in current Thai social and political issues.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of life in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. And this week, my friend, it is all about you.
So, Greg, I raised this thing as something that bothers me, so that's why I raised it. But I got to be honest, I don't think I've ever heard anyone else specifically complaining about this, so I don't know if this is really a thing. This might be an Ed thing and not a Thai thing. What do you think about how long Thais take to examine receipts?
Interesting. So this is not really love, loathe, or leave. It's just how much does it bother me, like a lot or not at all?
Yeah, well, it certainly can't be a good thing. I think that Thai, this is one of these tricky things, because you could argue that what Thai people are doing is the right thing, but I feel that Thai people trust receipts less than foreigners, and that they're just prone to sit there staring and checking and to make sure the receipt that came out of the cash register at 7-Eleven is accurate. You know what I mean? And it's not as if they stand there for 3 minutes, but it's just, even if it's 5 or 10 seconds, it's like, what are they checking? They think that 7-Eleven is trying to steal like 2 baht from them?
Well, I think this is very subjective, because it really depends on whether or not I'm standing behind that person.
Right.
And I'm willing to give someone 10 seconds to look at their receipt and make sure it's all there, because I know I'm the kind of guy that never looks at receipts for anything, restaurants, whatever. And I know I've been ripped off. I know someone's like added an extra zero somewhere and thrown in.
Okay, well, can you, because I'm just still trying to figure out if I'm crazy or not. Can you give me this, that Thai people on average spend more time checking receipts than foreigners?
I don't know if I could say definitively one way or the other.
Oh, really? Okay. So maybe it is. Okay, it might just be an Ed thing, but I feel that they do. I feel that they trust receipts less. And I just remember back in the day, when I was dating my wife, and she would just go over every receipt. But I've seen this in 7, so this is not just a thing. This is just not a wife thing. I've seen this in 7 where when I get handed a receipt, it just goes in my hand and shoved in my pocket with my change and my coins.
Usually in the garbage for me, and I know that I've been ripped off, but I should check, but I just never do.
Okay, I'm curious, listeners out there, if you think Thai people check receipts longer or more than foreigners do, they might be right. It might be a good idea to check, but to be honest, it is kind of a loathe. Even though it is usually only for 10 or 15 seconds, I just don't even know why they have to pause and look at it.
I will say one thing that bothers me is every time you get behind someone to 7-Eleven and they're trying to scan a QR code or like put in their special code with a special little pin pad they put in to save like, 14 satang on a sausage or something like that. Like there's all these deals that are usually only posted in Thai that my wife often gets.
Right. Right. Yeah. You're right. There's a lot of special deals at these places.
Yeah. They're never posted in English, but if you put in if you're an AIS customer, you can get this deal. And if you're a DTAC customer, you can get this deal, but then you got to put in the phone number and it's just like, come on guys, just let me buy my shit and get out of here.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a parallel loathe, but
yeah.
Maybe
we can say what we think about we loathe the fact that the Thai people exist in a system that is so untrustworthy that they feel they need to check their receipts all the time.
That's right.
I feel I should.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they could be right. But they just seem to trust receipts less. Okay. Yeah. I want to see if any listeners back me up on that.
All right. Well, that'll be interesting to hear. For me, I've never really noticed any more or less than anyone else.
Well, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. Tell me if you noticed it.
Cool. Thanks, man. Now I'm not going to be able to think about anything else. It's like that stupid Finnish folk tune that I played on last week's episode that's still in my head.
So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Tommy for lending us his support at the show shoutout level. And Greg, what did you find out about Tommy?
Well, as it turns out, our buddy Tommy is Norwegian. And says this is what he said. He says he accidentally came to Thailand in 2005. And I don't know how you accidentally came to Thailand. Maybe he was going to Taiwan and accidentally bought a ticket to Thailand. It's been done. And he fell in love with it, and he's since been coming back at least once a year ever since. Tommy says he has a place down in Nakhon Si Thammarat province, which is one of my favorite beach destinations in Thailand. So I definitely understand why he bought a place down there. But he considers Chiang Mai his home. He's not really a Bangkok guy yet. He's more of a Chiang Mai guy.
All right, cool. I like that.
I like Chiang Mai, yeah. And this is why I'm a little bit jealous. Here's another guy, Ed, another foreigner.
Damn it.
That we can be jealous of, because he said that over the course of 6 months, he did 180 hours of Thai language lessons and got his certificate. I'm not exactly sure what certificate that is. You can get a fluency certificate, right?
I don't know. I think there's some type of Thai government certificate that allows you to teach in a Thai school. So I don't know. Maybe that's what that is. I don't know.
But I know a lot of foreigners, what they work towards, like our friend John is working towards, is you take a Thai language proficiency test, and if you pass at the same level of a grade 6.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Test. That thing. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then you're considered like fluent in Thai. So maybe that's
cool.
what he got. Either way, 180 hours over 6 months. Damn, dude. But he says, we do a great job always finding new topics that are interesting, and also love when you discuss the Thai language. To be honest, I've been too lazy working on my Thai since I completed my course. To be able to have a conversation with local Thais is such a great feeling. And this stood out for me particularly today because like we talked about in our bonus show, I'm now sort of starting to be friends with all the parents of my son's classmates. Right. And they can't speak great English, and I can't speak good enough Thai to really get into things with them. And I wish I could.
Right.
It would be so awesome.
Right.
So Tommy has shown us the way. And I think we should enlist Tommy, whether he likes it or not, as our official Farang Thai language instructor for you and I to finally get our leg up on Thai.
It can't hurt. I'll tell you that. We got nothing to lose.
That's right. And maybe not 180 hours over 6 months. I think I've done about 180 hours over 20 years. So my average is pretty pathetic compared to Tommy's, but he seems to be doing pretty well. Tommy, thanks for your support, man. We hope you can make it back here pretty soon. You've probably been looking forward to another vacation since you come a few times a year. But when you are in Bangkok, when you are flying between Chiang Mai and Nakhon Si Thammarat, let us know. We'll go out for a beer, and you can give us a quick lesson on maybe some cool Thai words or something like that.
All right. Thank you, Tommy. A final thanks to our patrons who help keep the show ad-free. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcasts on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
True that. You can also listen to each episode on YouTubes. You can chat with us online or even reach out to me on Twitter, where I'm BKK Greg. So thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week.
Absolutely. Test, test, test. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Alrighty.
Hello. It's funny when I was teaching pratom at a girls' school years and years and years ago, 19 years ago, which is grade 6. There was one girl named Namhom, and she would say, "Teacher, can I do this?" And I would go, "No," and she would go, "Please." "No, you can't, Namhom. No, please." Over and over again. And now I told Kellen that, my son, and I told my son that, and now he does it too. So he's like, "Daddy, can I play PlayStation again?" I'm like, no, you play too much today. And he goes, "Please." It's like coming back to haunt me.
Now, is he doing that because? So is he
He's
copying,
doing it because he thinks
copying
it's
her?
funny, yeah.
Because it's funny. So it's not like he just is now. That's not how he actually pronounced it.
No, he knows that I thought it was kind of weird and annoying and funny, and now so he's copying this girl from 19 years ago, this ghost from the past.
Funny, very funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Okay.